Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Michael Wilson, and I'm the webinar producer for KardasLarson. Today's HR chat session is Crafting Retirement Plans for a Multi-Generational Workforce. Our presenters will share some of their insights and tips, and we encourage you to use the chat box to enter your questions for them to respond to during our Q&A segment. So without further delay, let's meet today's presenters. Leesa is a partner at KardasLarson, and her proficiency is in helping organizations create great workplaces. Today, she's joined by Amber Kendrick, Vice President of Procyon Partners and a retirement plan advisory firm. Amber helps small, medium, and large organizations craft retirement plans that will resonate with their employees. She's been recognized in the retirement plan industry as a top female advisor, and she's committed to helping America's workforce retire with dignity. So now I'll hand it over to Leesa to begin our presentation. Leesa?
Thank you, Michael, and hello to everyone. Amber, I'm so excited that we're here today talking about this. I went to a presentation earlier this morning where Lockton shared a benefits survey that they recently completed, 1,400 companies nationwide and 289 in the Northeast. So everything we're going to talk about today plays into exactly what their findings identified. So if this is your first HR chat, we're going to talk a little bit about identifying plans that appeal to all generations. What are some of the do's and don'ts? And then importantly, how do we communicate strategically and effectively? And then we turn it over to you so that you can ask your questions. And please, I encourage you to take advantage of having Amber here with us today and her expertise. So you ready to dive in, Amber?
I am, thank you.
All right, great. So one of the statistics that was shared with us this morning was that overall 96% of participants in this survey understand that competitive benefits are very important. And then interestingly, only 33% considered the diverse needs based on the multiple generations in the workplace when designing their programs. And so let's jump right into how do you design retirement plans for 5 generations in the workplace?
Well, thank you, Leesa. To answer that question, really, I start by identifying what the demographics are within the company, understand their values, and work to create plan provisions that are most suitable for their unique goals and objectives. Whether you have 10 employees or 100, chances are you have a mix of generations working for you, right? When designing retirement plans, I think it's important to consider that every generation values retirement as a benefit, but they approach it in different ways. So, for example, boomers are getting ready to retire, while Gen Xers are probably just beginning to ramp up their contributions and would appreciate all the help that they can get.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I don't know if you're that generation, Leesa, but
sadly, no.
Millennials, even though they're decades away from retirement, assume that they'll not be seeing much, if anything, from Social Security, and would happily accept matching contributions so they can begin saving early. As with them, it might take 50 years of working to be able to afford to retire in the first place.
Absolutely. And it was interesting this morning as they were doing a little capsule about the millennials, is that they do view it's going to take them a long time to accumulate enough wealth to be able to retire. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that acknowledgement is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Amber, what are some of the best practices when you're designing a plan, sort of the do's and don'ts, if you will?
Sure. So in looking at, we'll start with the do's here. You really want to have diverse investment committee or retirement plan committee in place. What I mean by that is having, a lot of the times, companies will just have their like a C-suite or executive management. I work with a company that includes a manager that is not, necessarily the C-suite, but is younger. And I would have to say that gentleman provides a different perspective that I think is really valuable, and it's important to understand that these committee members they're aging out, and so you really want to build out that diversity to allow for people to talk about what's important as it relates to the retirement plan that's in place. Another thing to think about are the auto features. Those, Leesa, have been around for quite some time. Auto features being auto enrollment and auto escalation. No matter what generation you are, really everyone seems to value having that. It's the idea of inertia, right? Do it for me, no matter, if you're millennials, baby boomers, whoever you are. I think that it's super important to have that. Anybody who's listening in, the auto escalation feature is super important. I've worked with some companies where, you have the auto enrollment, but they don't recognize that, you can, for example, have auto enrollment at, let's say, 6%, but, we're looking at contributions rates of where you need to be at 15%, right? That's a crazy number, but you have to set goals for yourself. And if you can have, the record keeper, let's just say, for example, Fidelity, automatically increase your contribution to get to that 15% at a future date, that's something from a planning perspective that really I found works. This next bullet is touchy, right? I think every company.
Amber, before we move on to that, I still am so surprised when we have clients that have not employed the auto features. And this morning, the statistic that was shared with us about the folks that were surveyed in the Northeast is that 57% of the organizations do have auto enroll. And while I'm not a millennial, I have millennial children who had a really hard time grasping that whole auto enroll. Why do I have to auto enroll? And so we talked a lot about the fact that their organizations, number one, match their contributions, and you're leaving money on the table if you don't, at least enroll for the amount of the match. So it's so interesting that organizations have not adopted it yet and really have not done a whole lot of training and education around it.
Right. Yeah. No, it is interesting, and I think that's why it's always important to revisit your plan provisions when so it's not just about designing them. It's about as a committee, and it doesn't have to be a committee of a large one, right? I have some companies where it's myself, HR, and the CFO, for example, and I think that's always something to keep on the radar, to your point.
Right. All right. So go ahead and talk to us about the employer match.
Yeah. Well, it's always challenging, and I laugh here because there's nothing worse whenever there's no employer match, and then I'm going out and educating. I've been educating America's workforce for almost 14 years now, so and there was a period of time where I just worked with nonprofits, so that was certainly challenging. But I think that really there's a misconception that it needs to be a larger figure for it to be impactful to employees. You can always start with a smaller amount. What I mean by that is like a match of 2% of pay, or come up with some formula where, I have even seen it's 1% of pay. If it's really something is better than nothing, on average, I will see with the companies that we work with where, it'll be 100% up to the first 3% of compensation is what the match would be, what's become popular there too is kind of stretching the match. What I mean by that, where it would be 50% up, instead of dollar for dollar in the 100 side, 50% up to the first 6. So, it encourages the employee to contribute more in order to be able to get the match. But regardless, it really, it's super helpful for, like I was saying before, that millennial population. It's the days of the defined benefit plans are, long gone. It's all about defined contribution and really taking ownership as the employee. So you definitely want to try to, if you can, do something there.
Yep, makes good sense. Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Okay. So moving on here, when I'm talking about the investments suitable for multiple generations, really there's different levels of sophistication when it comes to investing. Some are more sophisticated than others, which is fine. I would say 90% of the participants I work with are more of the do-it-for-me type of investor. That is where age-based target date funds come in and are helpful for that group, as it's actively managed and the portfolio is built for your age and mindful of a target retirement date out in the future. Those that like to pick and choose their own investments, as a company, you just want to make sure that you have the appropriate mix of diversified stocks and bonds, allowing for them to, be more conservative, as the baby boomers are approaching retirement. I think having some good income solutions there is really key. Whether or not you're moderate, maybe you're age 50, having a blend, a balanced type portfolio in that kind of risk tolerance, not moderate space, and then the aggressive investments as well. I mean, it's all about education, and I'm going to get to that as well. But you just want to make sure that in order for you to be able to have the investment piece is only one aspect of it. Savings is really, in my opinion, what is in that contribution rate, and increasing that is what's key. And then and the investments just complement it.
Right. Okay. Great. All right. And what about the things to avoid?
Yeah. So here, I think that we may think that, and we being, and I'm sitting on the same table, the same side of the table as HR and committees. We might think that we're educating employees and that they understand, what kind of benefits that they're receiving. But more often than not, in studies that I see out there, they really don't, and they're not valuing the fact that, going back to what I was saying about the nonprofits, I would go out and say, listen, companies don't have to they're not required to have a retirement plan. So the fact that they have a plan in place for you to be able to save, that means that, they truly care. So I think that, you just really have to continue to educate in that regard. I would suggest putting information on your company's intranet and break rooms, and because again, not everybody's going to go to the intranet. Some people are more comfortable with reading things and going back to the age groups and what their comfort level is, but you want to appeal to all of them, and emailing out at least quarterly, I would say, Leesa, information on the 401k plan. Another thing too here is benefit statements. If you're not doing that, I think that's always a great thing to have, where it pulls in all the benefit offerings. I find it to be valuable as well, right? So where you can talk about voluntary benefits, 401k, HSAs. Hey, here's a quick snapshot of what we're doing for you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And many companies still have not moved in that direction. So you're absolutely right.
Leesa, why do you think that's the case?
I think that they see it as being an onerous process to pull together all of this information, and they haven't really recognized the value in helping employees understand these are your benefits, and this is what they're worth to you. So on top of paying you competitively, we offer you this benefits package, which makes us, very competitive in the workplace. And having lived through creating benefits statements in an organization, it is kind of onerous to pull all of the different pieces from your data, particularly if you don't have an HRAS program that has all of it. So it is a little bit tough to do it, but the value that you get, and there are organizations out there that can help you, in my mind, surpasses the effort that you might need to put into it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point there. Yeah, so just to move on here with kind of things to avoid is just to allow your plan to run on autopilot. One thing I was going to mention before, Leesa, and kind of the connection between health and wealth, and that's really what we're seeing, a lot happen in the workplace, whether it's looking at plans holistically, with the retirement plan, I do see that, wow, we haven't, benchmark our plan in quite some time. You just have the plan with, let's just say, John Hancock, and we've been working with the same third-party administrator and the same advisor. So it's important to look at that. DOL best practice every 3 to 5 years, and you want to look at that for fees, investment offerings, education to employees as well, and any place that you can save cost. I mean, as you're aware, just to give you an idea, it's like 76% of the baby boomer population plans on delaying retirement, and that's super costly, right? So it's like, the stress of not being able to retire can lead to less, productive workforce. Healthcare costs is another major reason employers should consider getting their workforce as, financially well as they can. So any dollars you can find by kind of revisiting your plan and determining, are we in a good place? It's important. And then the last thing here in operating your plan without an advisor or consultant, I think the last Fidelity study I saw shows about 90% of companies have an advisor that helps with their plan, but there's still some companies out there that don't. I just mentioned this because, I'm seeing more and more, lawsuits where employees and participants at all different ages too are suing the company for not, having the best in breed investments or the more expensive share classes on investments, and they're really winning, and it's not necessarily, yes, it's crazy, and it's not necessarily, I mean, a lot of them are, the universities kind of suing TIA or whoever, but it's coming down market. I'm seeing that as well. So I mentioned that because you're acting as a fiduciary. So really, fiduciary is just acting in the best interest of the employees. But if there's HR listening in as well, I think that it's important to note that, if you're part of the, decision-making process, you're essentially a fiduciary to the plan. If you're on the committee, it's not always just the business owner or the CEO. So you really want to have somebody who's acting as a co-fiduciary, and that's what an advisor can help do to ensure that the plan is running smoothly.
Yep. Okay. All right. So in taking a look at the time, Amber, I want to get to folks' questions, but let's talk for a minute or so about communication. So very, very interesting, going back to what I learned this morning, is that 12% of the companies surveyed tailor their messaging to different segments of their population. And that is, as we talked about, so important for different generations. Certainly millennials don't want to be reading emails and things. They want something right on their phone. They want an app or something like that where they can quickly get information. So talk to us a little bit about some of the best practices around communication.
Oh, sure. So, well, first, you want to spend some time learning communication preferences amongst the 5 generations in the workplace. I would certainly carve out time to do that. We have So feel free after this call, we have plenty of resources out there. But I would certainly spend time in learning what those preferences are, and then provide multiple communication channels, when addressing employees on retirement plan benefits. We talked a little bit about this earlier. This includes different meeting formats, style of personal communication, and use of digital media. And, once you learn about the preferences, then you can kind of cater the communication strategy to those employees. I would work with your, advisor or consultant to kind of talk through that. Because a lot of the times if you're back on autopilot, it's become somewhat stale. And depending on how the company is structured, I've seen both group and or individual meetings work effectively. Regardless of the format, constant communication with a variety of financial education topics is what drives awareness and ultimately retirement readiness, which is important. When you're communicating to the younger population, the millennials, they're not as concerned about, pre-retirement seminars and things like long-term care, Social Security. So I think you just need those different financial education topics, because it's all about financial wellness and not as much about, where should I invest my money in my 401k.
Right.
The last point here is just create space for knowledge sharing. I love the idea of, power of the peers. More often than not, when I'm out, for example, at a manufacturing client, it's like, I have a handful of people signed up to meet with me, and then, they sit down and, I'm not that scary, right? Because it's hard talking about your finances. Right. And the next thing you know, it's like, hey, so-and-so said, to come in, and, she's not like that bad. So, I think letting the older and more experienced generations of employees act as, career mentors for the younger generations. Well, at the same time, creating an environment where the younger generations can inspire the older ones. In terms of the 401k, younger employees can help olders, download, like you were saying, Leesa, apps, and the older employees can help, remind the younger ones, hey, look at me, I'm, a third of our population is working past 70 today. They're the ones too that I would encourage, kind of say, hey, I love this company, but I don't love it that much, and I would love to retire,
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, great. Excellent. Well, Amber, this has been wonderful. Let's see what questions Michael has for us.
Okay, this is great. Okay, so the first question that we have here says, we have a decent amount of millennial employees that do not seem receptive to discussing the topic of saving for retirement. So how would you suggest communicating with this population?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Michael. So what I would say is I would provide, the millennials really, want to know what's in it for me. I think actually most of America does, but but you want to provide illustrations of, what contributions, if you're making a saving for retirement is a sacrifice, right? So if you provide illustrations of what contributions made now, how will those benefit you? Those future dollars, what do they look like? How that's going to build over time? I think that having something like that is helpful. And then just providing statistics to them. They're smart and they want to learn. They're eager. So if you give them a statistic, for example, like when you're at age 30, you should have half of your salary saved today for retirement in order for you to be able to live successfully. It's like, those are things like pause. Oh, wow, I am 30. Or,
Wow.
those are just, yeah.
I messed that up.
That's okay. There's still hope.
All righty. What else, Michael?
Another question that came in was, what advice would you give to the baby boomer population approaching retirement?
Oh, gosh, that's great. So it's never too late to save for retirement. My job is very rewarding. At the same time, it's really hard to sit down with folks and hear, that the fact that, they really are, are living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford to retire. But I just say a little bit can go a long way. What I'm finding is a decent amount of employees that give up kind of like as they're approaching. It's like, what's the point? They make comments like, I'm never going to be able to retire. I'm going to work until I'm dead. I'll be on the line until I'm dead. Going back to the manufacturer clients, so really something is better than nothing. And to continue to encourage, those folks, I think with consistent contributions and the power of compound interest, a lot of the times it grows quicker than you may think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. What else, Michael?
Yeah, another question is, can you expand on this idea of what financial wellness in the workplace means?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably expand for all day, but
well, give it a
no,
minute
we won't
or two.
do that today.
Yeah.
Well, no, the financial wellness it's interesting because when it first rolled out, it was like, trying to define it was difficult because financial wellness means that different things to different people. I personally think financial wellness is the ability of individuals and families to manage their daily finances while setting short and long-term investment goals. I would look at it that way. How companies can incorporate those topics, like I was talking about before. Whether it's building an emergency savings cushions, paying off home mortgage, setting up college funds, just all of those topics are becoming more relevant because we're identifying that that's the reason why people aren't saving, because they're juggling all these other priorities, and you've got to have somebody to help you navigate through that. So these financial wellness kind of robust programs are out there, and there's all different types of structures of them, but I would encourage anybody listening in to start taking a look at what programs are out there.
That's great advice. Thank you, Amber. Okay,
You're welcome.
we've got.
We're going to take one more question here.
Okay.
The last one I'm going to give you guys. It says, we're a nonprofit organization that doesn't offer an employer match on our retirement plan. So how would you encourage employees to enroll when they aren't receiving the benefit of the match?
Yeah. That's a great question. I would say if you're a nonprofit and you most likely have a 403B plan versus 401k. Some have 401ks. If you have a 403B plan, I would suggest conducting, like I said, that benchmark of fees and services. Years ago in the nonprofit market, you're really limited on the service providers. However, after kind of 2008 final 403B regulations came through, 403Bs look a lot like 401ks. I mention this because those older 403B contracts could be improved. So you could potentially, and I've helped companies in the past, organizations find extra dollars to, because you're not paying as much in fees, can deploy those costs and have that become the new kind of discretionary match or contribution into the plan. And like I said before, anytime you get excited about that if you have them, no matter what what generation you are.
Okay, well, thank you both for all these questions that you've answered and for all the great advice that you've given us. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's participated in this KardasLarson HR chat. We encourage you to follow KardasLarson on social media to receive information on our future webinars, compliance updates, and our speaking engagements. Please be on the lookout for an email with a survey so we can learn ways to bring you more great HR support content in the future. We're now signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.